sun has come out, the light has changed. I've gone from, if you look down the view, I had my paint box turned here. This is another thing I love about it. I just flipped it right around. I don't want the sunlight directly on my canvas. I also don't want the sunlight directly on my palette. It throws off your judgments as far as color goes. So I've just pulled this around this way to get my canvas in the shade. I'm still looking at my view down this way, and the sun is in and out, so we're just going to kind of go with it. If you'll notice, I blocked in my canvas. Next thing I did was clear off my palette. I'm going to try to keep my colors clear and not muddy. So I find that once I've done that blocking in, I just clean my palette off. I've still got my colors on here, and I'm just going to go from there. So from here, I'm going to just come back in here. I'm going to look at my view. I'll probably from here, I'll indicate some of those trees. Once again, I want to stress, I am not a slave to this view. I love this view, but everything is not going to be exact. Okay, so there's one I'm just going to indicate, just to start out, indicate some of those shapes, just so I will have a little bit of an idea of where those trees are going to go. I told you I'm not going to put that biggest tree over there, and I'm sticking with that. I'm still not. But I do have some trees over in here I'm going to put in. I don't want all of my trees straight up and down. I'm going to change those up a little bit. Okay. Now I do have some over in here. I might just indicate a little bit of that. Use some more of my Galkyd. Got trees over in here. And at the end, I'll probably come in with a smaller brush and put some of these rhodo vines, but I know that I'm going to have those in here. So the only thing I'm trying to do at this point is just get a little more detail, refine my painting a little bit more, step by step. Now, keep in mind, I'm still trying to work fast. You know, we're trying to work fast because, in theory, we're trying to catch that light. Okay? So from there, and I'm using a number 6 flat right now. Okay. Still want to check my viewfinder, still looking at that view. Remember to step back from your painting, give it some distance, take a look at it. Keep in mind where you're going with it. I have actually taken my path a little bit higher up than what I'm really looking at, just because I liked it higher. I like the way the composition looked a little bit better. Okay. So I'm going to come in here with some of these other colors. So I'm going to bring those rhodos up. They came up a little higher than what I had them. And it'll make a big difference in the detail when I get the stems of those plants in. Okay, so I know that comes up there. Now I haven't come in with any of my highlights yet. I want to leave that until the end, and we're far from the end. Okay, and so I see some of those. But as I'm moving forward, I will use warmer colors. As you can see, I've got my cools in the background, my cools, my more blue colors in the background, and then I'm going to, as I come forward, I'm going to bring in some warmth. I'm going to give touches of light back in that distance a little bit, back in there behind those rhodos, just an indication. I'm not going for anything highly detailed. Put some little lights back in here. Okay. Now these are not my highest highlights. I'm just trying to indicate where my plants are. Just to kind of keep in my mind where I'm going with it. Okay, some of those are going to come down further. This one is going to be up in here. Okay, and the whole time I'm just refining. All I'm doing, darker darks, lighter lights. Keep that in mind as you're looking at your scene. Okay. I'm probably not going to put in that tallest pine tree. I'll make that decision a little bit later on. We don't have to decide that right now. I think it may be distracting. Now you see I'm just kind of wiping the paint out where I'm going to indicate these trees. Okay, I think I'm do the same thing with these rhododendron bushes. Just going to kind of indicate, and I do want some light showing through there. Okay. I'm going to use some of my earth color. Keep in mind, I've got my Galkyd Lite on this palette, and I'm just barely dipping my brush in as I go. I've got the darker earth color over here, so I'm going to bring it to the other side as well, just to balance it. Notice there's some leaves. I want to indicate some leaves back there. Okay, I've got a little bit more of that. I kind of want to spread the color around. That's just personal preference. I don't want it to be too knocked out. Okay, so these rhododendron they're fading around that corner, but I can see a little bit of light back in there, so I'm going to leave those light touches. Okay. Okay, and as they're going through down that little row, I can see those. Now, I think I mentioned that I do not use tube greens. I think that you can mix up any sort of green that you would want. These greens are a little bit too cool, so I'm going to come in and go warmer with them. But I think with the colors that I've got on this palette, I can just make up lots of different greens. For me, when I paint, and I have used a tube green before, but I feel like everything comes out looking too similar. So I like to mix my greens. Okay, so as you can see, we've put in some other lights. We're starting to see how that path is going around there now. We've got some of those trees indicated, but not every one. We're not going to put them all in there. We'll go back and change up the color of those. We'll go back and put our sky in and put our darks and lights on these tree trunks. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get out a smaller brush. I think I'll go to the I'll go to maybe even a number 2, and I'm just going to start to indicate some of those rhododendron vines. Okay, and then at the end, what I'll do, put a few highlights on here. If you'll notice, I'm indicating these vines. I am not painting every vine. To me, plein air painting, I've heard artists describe it as like the poetry of painting. I feel like the poetry of painting, I don't go for a lot of detail. I think the viewer can look at a painting, and if you can use one mark to indicate something, I'm not going to use a lot of other marks to put in too much detail. I like less detail. Okay, I'm going to soften some of these edges up here. And these are grayed out edges from the bare trees in the background. You can still see that hazy mountain. That mountain is still hazy looking at it. Okay. Just soften these edges. I don't want anything to be exact. Okay, so I'm going to come back in there, even soften these some more. Get my values a little bit more similar there. Okay, so I want the feeling of kind of an overcast, a little bit of an overcast day, but we're looking down this pathway and we're seeing that mountain. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of that little number 2 brush. Okay, remember to step back, take a look what you're doing, see if you're happy with how it's coming. Okay. Switch to a different brush, and I'm going to switch to the number 4 flat and come in with a few more darks along the edge of this path. Uh-oh. Okay, because these are my darkest darks. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to take some on out here. These are all rhododendron, but this is not the focus of this painting. So I'm going to have less detail in this bottom left corner. My focal point, I'll say my focal area probably would be describing it better, is just going to be where this path goes around the corner. So I've got my lightest light right in there and my darkest dark. That's what I'm choosing as my focal point, okay? So I'm going to have more detail right in this area than I'm going to have here or anywhere, really. I'm going to have sharper edges right in there so that that's where the eye goes. Okay. Get my paintbrush. Now when you're out painting, you can take this as far as you want to take it. For me, I like to stop, you know, if I've got a pretty good indication of the scene and I'm fairly happy, I like to keep the painting loose. I want to go further on this one, but I do like to keep it loose. I don't want anything overly detailed. That varies from artist to artist. If you get out and you're plein air painting and it starts raining, you're going to run with it. You're going to take it home and you're going to finish it. But I would recommend you do as much as you can out in the field, because you're, you know, there's nothing like standing here and looking at that view really, to painting it. And some artists, you know, they definitely want to finish it in the field. I'll take it home and, you know, put on my highest highlights and even darken it up a little bit more just because sometimes I feel like since you're working with such wet paint, sometimes it's hard to get those high highlights, you know, the highest lights on there. So that's just personal preference. Okay, so I've darkened up around there. I want to put some of these leaves. I want to go for the leaves next. Put a little yellow in there. Yep. A little more burnt sienna. I always like to put at least a touch of red into my blue and yellow mix. No matter what color green I'm coming up with or trying to come up with, I really do like to have that little bit of red in there. To me, it just kind of knocks it back a little bit, so it's not as bright, and I prefer that. Okay, so you can see I'm gonna come in, and these are gonna be some of those leaves that we're looking at. And now I'm seeing some sun, so I'll actually put some highlights on that shortly. And the thing is, how do you know when to stop? Ah, that's the hard part. That's really the hard part. I could stand out here all afternoon, but in reality, what I will usually do, my sessions will usually run, I won't work on a painting normally more than an hour. I'd say an hour or hour and a half. I'm just trying to capture some of that scene and move on. Okay, I'm going to get some of that earth color over in here just to break up those greens. You see I'm putting thicker and thicker paint on. Step back, take a look. Okay. I think I'm going to work on my trees a little bit, put some highlights on these rhododendron and these leaves, and we'll just almost be ready to call it a day.